This is the lesson 9, title The Living Organisms, Characteristics and Habitats. From page 79 to 94. Page 79. The living organisms, characteristics and habitats. Paheli and Bujo went on vacation to many places of interest. One such trip took them to the river Ganga in Rishikesh. They climbed the mountains of the Himalayas, where it was very cold. They saw many kinds of trees on these mountains: oaks, pines, and deodars, very different from the ones near their home on the plains. In yet another trip, they travelled to Rajasthan and moved on camels through the hot desert. They collected different kinds of cactus plants from this trip. Finally, they went on a trip to Puri and visited the sea beach dotted with casuarina trees. While recollecting all the fun that they had on these trips, a thought struck them. All these places were so different from one another. Some very cold, some very hot and dry, and some places so humid. And yet all of them had many organisms, living creatures of various kinds. They tried to think of a place on earth where there may not be any living creatures. Bujo thought of places near his home. Inside the house, he tried the cupboards. He had thought that there may not be any living organisms here. But he found one tiny spider in the cupboard. Outside the home too, there did not seem to be any place he could think of that did not have living creatures of some kind or the other. Figure 9.1. Paheli started thinking and reading about faraway places. She read that people have even found tiny living organisms in the openings of volcanoes. Figure 9.1 shows search for living organisms. 9.1. Organisms and the surroundings where they live. Another thought that occurred to Paheli and Bujo was about the kinds of living organisms that were present in different locations that they had visited. The deserts had camels. The mountains had goats and yak. Puri had some other creatures, crabs on the beach and such a variety of fish being caught by the fishermen at the sea. And then there did seem to be some creatures like ants that were present in all these different locations. The kinds of plants found in each of these regions were so different from the plants of the other regions. What about the surroundings in these different regions? Were they the same? Page 80. Activity 1. Let us start with a forest. Think of all the plants, animals, and objects that can be found there. List them in column 1 of table 9.1. List things, animals, and plants found in the other regions that are also shown in the table. You can collect the examples scattered through this chapter to fill table 9.1. Discuss also with your friends, parents, and teachers to find more examples to fill the tables. You can also consult many interesting books in libraries that talk of animals, plants, and minerals of different regions. Try and include many plants, animals, and objects, big and small, in each of the columns in this table. What kind of objects will we find that may not be animals or plants? Perhaps parts of plants like dried leaves or parts of animals like bones. We may also find different kinds of soils and pebbles. Water in the oceans may have salts dissolved in it as discussed in chapter 5. There could be many more objects. As we go through the chapter, keep adding more examples to table 9.1. We will discuss the table as we travel through many more interesting places. Table 9.1. Animals, plants, and the other objects found in different surroundings. The table is divided into 5 columns: in the forest, on mountains, in the desert, in the sea, any other. Complete this table according to your observation. 9.2. Habitat and adaptation. What do you find from the plants and animals listed in Activity 1? Did you find a large variety in them? Look at what you have entered in the column for the desert and the column for the sea in table 9.1. Did you list very different kind of organisms in these 2 columns? What are the surroundings like in these 2 regions? In the sea, plants and animals are surrounded by saline, salty water. Most of them use the air dissolved in water. There is very little water available in the desert. It is very hot in the daytime and very cold at night in the desert. The animals and plants of the desert live on the desert soil and breathe air from the surroundings. The sea and the desert are very different surroundings. And we find very different kind of plants and animals in these 2 regions, isn't it? Let us look at 2 very different kind of organisms from the desert and the sea: a camel and a fish. The body structure of a camel helps it to survive in desert conditions. Camels have long legs, which help to keep their bodies away from the heat of the sand. Figure 9.2. Page 81. They excrete small amount of urine. Their dung is dry and they do not sweat. Since camels lose very little water from their bodies, they can live for many days without water. Let us look at different kinds of fish. Some of these are shown in figure 9.3. There are so many kinds of fish. But do you see that they all have something common about their shape? All the ones shown here have the streamlined shape that was discussed in chapter 8. This shape helps them move inside water. Fish have slippery scales on their bodies. These scales protect the fish and also help in easy movement through water. We discussed in Chapter 8 that fish have flat fins and tails that help them to change directions and keep their body balance in water. Gills present in the fish help them to use oxygen dissolved in water. We see that the features of a fish help it to live inside water, and the features of a camel help it to survive in a desert. We have taken only 2 examples from a very wide variety of animals and plants that live on the earth. In all this variety of organisms, we will find that they have certain features that help them live in the surroundings in which they are normally found. The presence of specific features or certain habits which enable an organism to live naturally in a place is called adaptation. Adaptation of organisms differ depending on their place of dwelling. That is why a fish cannot live out of water and a camel cannot live in sea. The place where organisms live is called habitat. Habitat means a dwelling place or a home. The habitat provides food, water, air, shelter, and other needs to organisms. Several kinds of plants and animals live in the same habitat. Plants and animals that live on land are said to live in terrestrial habitats. Some examples of terrestrial habitats are forests, grasslands, deserts, coastal and mountain regions. Habitats of plants and animals that live in water are called aquatic habitats. Figure 9.2 shows camels in their surroundings. Figure 9.3 shows different kinds of fish. Page 82. Lakes, rivers, and oceans are some examples of aquatic habitats. There are large variations among terrestrial habitats like forests, grasslands, deserts, coastal and mountain regions located in different parts of the world. There are some changes that can happen in an organism over a short period of time to help them adjust to some changes in their surroundings. For instance, if we live in the plains and suddenly go to high mountain regions, we may experience difficulty in breathing and doing physical exercise for some days. We need to breathe faster when we are on high mountains. After some days, our body adjusts to the changed conditions on the high mountain. Such small changes that take place in the body of a single organism over short periods to overcome small problems due to changes in the surroundings are called acclimatization. These changes are different from the adaptations that take place over thousands of years. The organisms, both plants and animals, living in a habitat are its biotic components. The non-living things such as rocks, soil, air, and water in the habitat constitute its abiotic components. Are sunlight and heat biotic or abiotic components? We know that some plants grow from seeds. Let us look at some abiotic factors and their effect on seeds as they grow into young plants. Activity 2. Recall Activity 5 in Chapter 1. We made sprouts from moong and chana seeds. When the seed turned into a sprout, it is said to have germinated. This is the beginning of life of a new plant. Collect some dry moong seeds. Keep 20-30 seeds aside and soak the rest in water for a day. Divide the soaked seeds into 4 parts. Keep one part completely submerged in water for 3 to 4 days. Do not disturb the dry seeds and those submerged in water. Keep one part of soaked seeds in a sunny room and another in a completely dark region like a cupboard that does not allow any light to come in. Keep the last part in very cold surroundings, say in a refrigerator or with ice around them. Rinse them and replace the water every day. What do you notice after a few days? Do the seeds in all the 5 conditions germinate uniformly? Do you find slower or no germination in any of these? Do you realize that abiotic factors like air, water, light, and heat are important for the growth of plants? In fact, abiotic factors are important for all living organisms. We find that organisms exist in very cold as well as very hot climates. Isn't it? How do they manage to survive? Adaptation is the method by which organisms get well adjusted to the climate. Page 83. Adaptation does not take place in a short time because the abiotic factors of a region also change very slowly. Those organisms which cannot adapt to these changes die, and only the adapted ones survive. Organisms adapt to different abiotic factors in different ways. This results in a wide variety of organisms in different habitats. Let us look at some habitats. Understood the abiotic factors and the adaptations of animals in these habitats. 9.3. A journey through different habitats. Some terrestrial habitats. Deserts. We discussed the abiotic factors of a desert and the adaptations in camels. What about other animals and plants that are found in deserts? Do they have the same kind of adaptations? There are desert animals like rats and snakes which do not have long legs that a camel has. To stay away from the intense heat during the day, they stay in burrows deep in the sand. Figure 9.4. These animals come out only during the night when it is cooler. Figure 9.5 shows some typical plants that grow in a desert. How are these adapted to the desert? Activity 3. Bring a potted cactus and a leafy plant to the classroom. Tie polythene bags to some parts of the 2 plants as was done for Activity 4 in Chapter 7, where we studied transpiration in plants. Leave the potted plants in the sun and observe after a few hours. What do you see? Do you notice any difference in the amount of water collected in the 2 polythene bags? Desert plants lose very little water through transpiration. The leaves in desert plants are either absent, very small, or they are in the form of spines. This helps in reducing loss of water from the leaves through transpiration. The leaf-like structure you see in a cactus is, in fact, its stem. Figure 9.5. Photosynthesis in these plants is usually carried out by the stems. The stem is also covered with a thick waxy layer which helps to retain water in the tissues of cacti. Most desert plants have roots that go very deep into the soil for absorbing water. Figure 9.5. Some typical plants that grow in desert. Page 84. Mountain regions. These habitats are normally very cold and windy. In some areas, snowfall may take place in winters. There is a large variety of plants and animals living in the mountain regions. Have you seen the kind of trees shown in figure 9.6? If you live in a mountain region or have visited one, you may have seen a large number of such trees. But have you ever noticed such trees naturally growing in other regions? How are these trees adapted to the conditions prevailing in their habitat? These trees are normally cone-shaped and have sloping branches. The leaves of some of these trees are needle-like. This helps the rainwater and snow to slide off easily. There could be trees with shapes very different from these that are also present on mountains. They may have different kind of adaptations to survive on the mountains. Figure 9.6 shows trees of a mountain habitat. Animals living in the mountain regions are also adapted to the conditions there. Figure 9.7. They have thick skin or fur to protect them from cold. For example, yaks have long hair to keep them warm. Snow leopard has thick fur on its body. Figure 9.7a shows snow leopard, B shows yak, and C shows mountain goat are adapted to mountain habitats. Snow leopard has thick fur on its body, including feet and toes. This protects its feet from the cold when it walks on the snow. Page 85. The mountain goat has strong hooves for running up the rocky slopes of the mountains. As we go up in the mountainous regions, the surroundings change and we see different kinds of adaptations at different heights. Grasslands. A lion lives in a forest or a grassland and is a strong animal that can hunt and kill animals like deer. It is light brown in color. Look at the picture of a lion and that of a deer. Figure 9.8. How are the eyes placed in the face for these two animals? Are they in the front or on the side of the face? Lions have long claws in their front legs that can be withdrawn inside the toes. Do the features of a lion help it in any way to survive? Its light brown color helps it to hide in dry grasslands when it hunts for prey, that is, animals to eat. The eyes in front of the face allow it to have a correct idea about the location of its prey. A deer is another animal that lives in forests and grasslands. It has strong teeth for chewing hard plant stems of the forest. A deer needs to know about the presence of predators, that is, animals like lion that make it their prey, in order to run away from them and not become their prey. It has long ears to hear movements of predators. The eyes on the side of its head allow it to look in all directions for danger. The speed of the deer helps them to run away from the predators. There are many other features of a lion, a deer, or other animals and plants that help them to survive in their habitat. Figure 9.8a shows a lion and B shows a deer. Some aquatic habitats. Oceans. We already discussed how fish are adapted to live in the sea. Many other sea animals have streamlined bodies to help them move easily in water. There are some sea animals like squids and octopus, which do not have this streamlined shape. They stay deeper in the ocean, near the seabed, and catch any prey that moves towards them. However, when they move in water, they make their body shapes streamlined. These animals have gills to help them use oxygen dissolved in water. There are some sea animals like dolphins and whales that do not have gills. Page 86. They breathe in air through nostrils or blowholes that are located on the upper parts of their heads. This allows them to breathe in air when they swim near the surface of water. They can stay inside the water for a long time without breathing. They come out to the surface from time to time to breathe in air. Did you ever see this interesting activity of dolphins in television program or films on ocean life? Ponds and lakes. Have you seen plants growing in ponds, lakes, rivers, and even some drains? Go on a field trip to a nearby pond, if possible, and try to observe the kinds of plants that are seen there. Observe the leaves, stems, and roots of these plants. Some of these plants have their roots fixed in the soil below the water. Figure 9.9. In terrestrial plants, roots normally play a very important role in the absorption of nutrients and water from the soil. However, in aquatic plants, roots are much reduced in size, and their main function is to hold the plant in place. The stems of these plants are long, hollow, and light. The stems grow up to the surface of water, while the leaves and flowers float on the surface of water. Some aquatic plants are submerged in water. All parts of such plants are underwater. Some of these plants have narrow and thin ribbon-like leaves. These can bend in the flowing water. In some submerged plants, leaves are often highly divided, through which the water can easily flow without damaging them. Frogs usually live in ponds. Frogs can stay both inside the water as well as move on land. They have strong back legs that help them in leaping and catching their prey. They have webbed feet which help them swim in water. We have discussed only a few common animals and plants compared to the wide variety that live in different habitats. You may have also noticed the very wide variety in plants around you when you prepared a herbarium as part of the suggested activities in Chapter 7. Imagine the kind of variety that you could see in a herbarium of leaves of plants from all regions of the earth. Figure 9.9 shows some aquatic plants float on water. Some have their roots fixed in the soil at the bottom. Some aquatic plants are submerged in water.